Oh, hey folks, how you doing? Don Grant, CTC, Cutting Tool Counselor, with another episode of In the Loop TV, sponsored by Harvey Performance Company. Thanks for coming back. Before we get started, you know the formality, we say it every time. Just hit the like, hit the subscribe if you haven't yet. If you have subscribed, oh, thank you for doing that. It really helps us support everybody out there in the cutting tool industry with some of the knowledge that we bring. Thanks for doing that. I much appreciate it. What are we going to talk about on this episode? You know what? We're going to keep this one short. I want to keep this one a little bit simple, and I kind of want to go back to something called taps. These next episodes are going to be about taps. We're going to start a little bit in the early stages of taps. We're going to talk about hand tapping. Yes, hand tapping. You might go, well, where does hand tapping fit with high performance cutting tools? Well, if you never broke a tap when you're hand tapping something or repairing something and fixing it, you might say that it's not important to understand about hand taps. But if you have actually snapped one of those hand taps, you might want to stick around for this episode and learn a little bit more about some of the differences in hand taps. Do that. We're not going to talk about it here. We're going to talk about it next. Well, folks, thanks for coming back. I much appreciate it. What are we talking about on this episode? We're talking about angles on the end of hand taps. There's all different angles, right? There's actually 3 to 4 different angles on the end of a hand tap. You know, when you use a hand tap on your workbench and you got to actually drive that thing in there, squirting the oil in it to make sure you can get an efficient hand tap. Well, what do those angles do, and how should we use those more efficiently? We're going to talk about the angles. We're going to keep it short. We're just going to talk about the different taper angles on the end of hand taps and why those are like that and how we use them. We can't do it here. We're going to run to the shop. Talk about it next. Well, hey folks, thanks for coming back. Appreciate it. Just before we get started, I think my hat is on its last leg. This thing's held together with duct tape, glue, and I think it's got a little bit of stitching in it. We're going to see how many episodes this hat can make before it's time to get a new one. Let's hope it lasts. My favorite hat, folks. So we're talking about taps, and we're talking about hand taps, and that's what we're going to talk about for this episode. I'm going to keep it as short and sweet, and we'll try and be as specific as possible. So there's 3 basic types of hand taps that I want everybody to understand for this episode. There is a taper, a plug, and a bottoming. So those 3 words when we're looking at hand taps, taper, plug, bottoming, what do they mean? And which one should I gravitate toward when I'm actually making a tap by hand? We're going to learn about it. We're going to talk about those 3 different types and what's the difference and how to use them most effectively. So when you're looking at these 3 different types of taps, the main difference in each one of these is the start threads. The start threads, which means the chamfer that's at the end, how many of those threads are partial before you get to a full thread. That's really the difference. So let's just start with a taper tap. Taper tap has around 7 to 10 start threads before it gets to a full thread. That's what a taper is, 7 to 10 threads before it gets to a full thread. Now, if we look at a plug tap has around 3 to 5 start threads before it gets to a full thread. We're going to talk about why that is. Just hold on. I'm trying to break it down. So 3 to 5 on a plug. So there's 3 to 5 start threads before we get to a full thread. Now a bottoming has 1 to 2 start threads before we get to a full thread. So that's really the difference on the 3 of these hand taps. A taper has 7 to 10 start threads before a full thread, before the one that's going to gauge. A plug has 3 to 5 start threads before we get to a full thread because of the chamfer. And then a bottoming has 1 to 2 start threads before we get to a full thread. So folks, if we look at all 3 of these, a taper, a plug, and a bottoming tap, from a hand perspective, okay, The taper is the easiest one. It's going to make the best amount of threads, right? So you always want to kind of start with a taper or a plug because it's the gradual amount of stock that's going to be removed before it gets to a full thread. Do not start with a bottoming tap. Do not start with a bottoming tap. Really, in a hand situation, a bottoming tap, whether it be a blind hole, because we have two holes, right? We have a through hole that goes all the way through, and then we have a blind hole that stops short. Usually the blind holes need the thread all the way to the bottom, in which case you need to use a bottoming tap to get there. What I'm telling you is we have a taper and a plug for a reason. It's the easiest way to make the thread. Start with a taper tap, get down there, or start with a plug tap, start your threads, gradually make them, don't break the tap, then go in with your bottoming and finish the bottom of the hole. Now, if it's a through hole, and we look at this, by all means, if you can get that taper, use that in a hand situation to go all the way through. Use a plug to go all the way through. It'll be the easiest way. If you start with a bottoming, you're going to have troubles. The larger the chamfer, the easier it is to make the threads. It gradually cuts the threads. That's the difference, folks. That's why it's hand tapping, right? It's a little bit more crude and rude, but we still have to do it. There's a lot of hand tapping going on, and let's make it easy. Now, this is all material-based, right? If you're cutting aluminum, you probably can get away with a bottoming tap, but you start getting in your 4140s and your steel, and you start getting into stainless steels especially, okay, you're going to struggle. You really want to start with the taper style tap or a plug. Don't ever start with a bottoming. But that's it, the three different types of taps. We have a taper style, we have a plug style, and we have a bottoming style. Now, I hope when you're looking at that and you go, geez, what's the difference between those three taps and how do I use them? You go, wait a minute, I watched the Cutting Tool Counselor's video on that. I know exactly how to use those taps in my next application, and you will be successful 100% of the time. Well, folks, thanks for joining me on this episode of In the Loop TV on hand taps. Now we're going to dive into some CNC taps, and there's a lot that goes on with CNC taps. Do I go with a floating tap holder? Do I go rigid? What kind of tap do I want? Do I want material specific? What's the difference on material specific? H limits. What's an H limit on a tap? We're going to dive into it. We're going to talk about it. Hopefully you're going to feel comfortable or at least understand a little bit more about taps when we're done with these episodes. But before I go, just remember, there's 3 guarantees in life: death, taxes, and spring passes. Have a great rest of your week, folks.